I am just a chronicler and welcome you to another video. Since I know many of you watch to relax and fall asleep, I thought it would be nice if you left a comment telling me where you're listening from and if it's raining there. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you're enjoying the episodes. Now, it's time to get comfortable, relax, and begin. The first shield began its song 3 nights after the summer solstice. Brother Marcus stood at his post in the monastery's eastern tower, watching the moon rise over ancient walls when he heard it. A low, ethereal hum emanating from his own shield. The sound rose from the metal-like breath from sleeping lips, barely audible above the evening wind. Marcus touched the shield's smooth surface, feeling the subtle vibration beneath his fingertips. The red cross emblazoned on its face seemed darker than usual in the moonlight, almost black against the steel. He had carried this shield for 7 years, through 3 campaigns, and never had it made such a sound. In the courtyard below, torches flickered along the monastery walls where other knights maintained their watch. The sacred relics they guarded lay secure in the underground vault, sealed behind 3 blessed doors. Yet something felt different tonight. The air held an expectant weight, like the moment before a storm breaks. He did not report the singing shield that first night. Who would believe such a thing? The Knights Templar were warriors of God, not tellers of ghost stories. But the next night, the shield sang again. This time, Brother Thomas heard it too. Like distant chanting, he said, running his hand along the shield's edge. But no words I can make out. Within a week, 5 more shields had joined the chorus. Always at night, always facing east toward the Holy Lands. The knights spoke of it in whispers during their morning prayers, theories spreading through the monastery like smoke. Commander Richard called a council in the chapter house. 24 knights gathered in the torchlit chamber, shields propped against stone walls. The commander's weathered face looked grave in the flickering light as he addressed his men. "Brothers, we face a mystery unlike any in our order's history," he said. "Last night, I consulted the sealed texts in our library. There is mention of singing shields in one ancient prophecy, dating back to our order's founding." A murmur passed through the assembled knights. The commander unrolled a fragile scroll, its edges crumbling with age. "When the shields of the faithful raise their voices to the night sky, know that judgment approaches. Look to their faces for signs of what is to come." That very night, they discovered the first marking. Brother Marcus found it while cleaning his shield. Delicate lines etched into the metal, visible only in moonlight. They formed letters in ancient Hebrew, curving around the red cross like a wreath. More appeared in the following days. Each shield developed its own unique inscription, the letters seeming to rise from within the metal itself. The choir of shields grew stronger, their harmony more complex. Knights began reporting dreams of distant cities and battles yet to come. Commander Richard ordered the shields examined by the monastery's scholars. They worked by candlelight in the library, comparing the inscriptions to ancient texts. The translations, when they finally emerged, brought little comfort. "They speak of trials," the head scholar reported, "of a time when the order's faith will be tested. The shields are being marked as witnesses." The singing reached its peak during the autumn equinox. That night, all the marked shields joined in a chorus that echoed through the monastery's halls. Knights stood at their posts, listening as the ethereal music rose toward the stars. The Hebrew letters glowed with an inner light, casting strange shadows on the stone walls. In the vault below, the sacred relics began to react. Crystal vessels hummed in harmony with the shields. Ancient scrolls unrolled themselves, revealing hidden text that matched the shield's inscriptions. The very air seemed charged with divine energy. Commander Richard gathered his knights in the monastery's chapel. Dozens of marked shields lined the walls, their song filling the sacred space. The commander's voice cut through the ethereal chorus. "Brothers, we stand at a crossroads of prophecy," he said. "Our shields have become vessels of divine will. Each mark, each note of their song carries a message we must understand." He gestured to the assembled shields. "These are no longer mere weapons of war. They have become instruments of judgment, testing our worthiness as guardians of sacred truth." The knights listened in silence as their commander read from the translated inscriptions. The shields spoke of coming darkness, of trials that would shake the order to its foundations. They warned of betrayal from within and persecution from without. But they also promised guidance for those pure of heart and true to their vows. That night, Brother Marcus stood again at his post in the eastern tower. His shield sang its otherworldly song, its glowing inscriptions casting blue light across his armor. The moon rose over ancient walls, just as it had that first night, but nothing would ever be the same. The Knights Templar had always been more than mere soldiers. They were guardians of sacred mysteries, keepers of divine secrets. Now their very weapons had become proof of this higher calling, and warning of the price it carried. As autumn deepened into winter, more shields throughout the order began to sing. The phenomenon spread from monastery to fortress, from Holy Land to homeland. Each new inscription added another layer to the prophecy, another harmony to the divine chorus. The knights knew their duty. They would stand there, watch, guard their charges, and prepare for whatever trials awaited. Their shields had become more than protection. They were now instruments of divine will, marking each bearer for a role in the battles to come. Brother Marcus often thought back to that first night, when a single shield raised its voice to the darkness. He understood now that it had marked the beginning of a new chapter in their order's sacred history. The singing shields were both blessing and burden, promise and warning. In the end, that was the true nature of their calling, to stand at the crossroads between heaven and earth, between sacred and profane. Their shields would guide them through the coming storms, one divine note at a time. The mystery of the singing shields became part of Templar lore, whispered about in torchlit halls and secret chambers. But only those who had heard the shield's song truly understood. They were no longer just weapons of steel and faith. They had become vessels of prophecy, marking their bearers for a divine purpose none could yet fully comprehend. And still, the shields sang their ethereal chorus, every note carrying messages of what was to come. The knights listened and waited and prepared for the trials ahead. For they were the Knights Templar, and this was their sacred duty, to stand guard not just over earthly treasures, but over mysteries that bridge the gap between heaven and earth. Story 2. The mountain hospice stood like a stone sentinel against the winter sky, its weathered walls rising from the rocky slopes the pilgrims had climbed for generations. Brother Thomas kept his vigil at the iron-bound gate, white mantle dusted with snow, watching the winding path that led faithful travelers to this remote sanctuary on their journey to the Holy Lands. The stranger arrived at dusk. His walking staff struck the frozen ground in an odd rhythm as he approached, and something about his movement made Thomas's hand drift to his sword hilt. The pilgrim's hood was drawn low, concealing his face, but his voice, when it came, sent ice through Thomas's veins. "Murochnas. Murochnas," the pilgrim whispered, the Latin prayer flowing backward from his lips like water running uphill. He raised a trembling hand, pointing eastward toward distant lands, his finger tracing symbols in the air. Thomas crossed himself, then called for Brother Marcus. The older knight emerged from the hospice, his armor clinking softly in the gathering dark. Together, they led the strange pilgrim inside, where dozens of other travelers huddled around blazing hearths. "I've never heard Latin spoken thus," Marcus muttered, watching as the pilgrim sank onto a wooden bench. "It's as if the words themselves are twisted." Before Thomas could respond, another voice rose from among the gathered pilgrims. A woman in travel-stained robes, her eyes fixed on some distant point. She too spoke backward, the same reversed prayer falling from her lips. Her hand rose, pointing east like an arrow. Within an hour, 3 more pilgrims had joined the unholy chorus. Commander Richard summoned his knights to the hospice's small chapel. Incense smoke coiled around the sword-calloused hands of 24 Templar warriors as they knelt before the altar. The commander's voice was grave in the candlelight. "Brothers, we face a mystery that may test more than our swords," he said. "The archives speak of such occurrences, when common pilgrims become vessels for messages beyond their understanding." He gestured to Brother Gabriel, the hospice's scholar, who unrolled a fragile scroll. "This text dates from our order's founding," Gabriel said. "It warns of a time when pilgrims would speak in reversed tongues, all pointing toward the dawn. The writing suggests this heralds a divine revelation, one that concerns the fate of our order." Through the stone walls came the sound of more voices joining the backward chorus. The knights exchanged uneasy glances, hands tightening on sword hilts. That night, Thomas stood watch in the pilgrims' hall. Torchlight flickered across the faces of sleeping travelers, casting strange shadows on the ancient walls. The affected pilgrims lay rigid on their pallets, still murmuring their reversed prayers, still pointing eastward even in sleep. Brother Marcus joined him near midnight, bringing a worn book from the archives. "Look at this," he whispered, indicating a series of illuminated pages. Similar events were recorded at other hospices nearly 2 centuries ago. Each occurrence preceded a major turn in our order's history. Thomas studied the careful script. What followed these manifestations? The records are unclear, but there are references to a prophecy, one the order has carried in secret since its founding. The backward prayers grew louder, more urgent. More pilgrims joined the chorus each hour, their hands rising in unison to point toward distant lands. The sound echoed through the hospice's stone corridors, like the buzzing of angry bees. Commander Richard ordered the unaffected pilgrims moved to separate quarters. His knights maintained constant vigil, watching as the strange phenomenon spread like a fever through the travelers' ranks. By dawn, more than 20 pilgrims were caught in the mysterious trance. In the chapel, Brother Gabriel pored over ancient texts, searching for answers. The air grew thick with incense as knights kept their prayers, asking for guidance. Candle flames danced strangely, seeming to bend toward the east. On the 3rd day, the first symbol appeared. Thomas found it while making his rounds, a marking burned into the hospice's stone floor, directly beneath where the first pilgrim had stood. It matched no writing he knew, yet stirred something deep in his memory, like a half-remembered dream. More symbols emerged in the following days, burning themselves into wood and stone. They formed patterns that Brother Gabriel recognized from sealed Templar documents, prophecies handed down since the order's founding. Speaking of trials and tribulations to come, the backward prayers continued, but now they carried new words among the reversed Latin, names of places long lost to time, dates that made the scholars pale when they calculated their meaning, warnings that spoke of the order's future in dark terms. Commander Richard gathered his knights again, his face grave in the chapel's candlelight. "Brothers, we stand at a crossroads of prophecy," he said. "These pilgrims have become vessels for a message, one that concerns not just our order, but the very future of our sacred mission." He gestured to Brother Gabriel, who laid out a series of documents on the altar. "We've translated portions of their reversed speech," the scholar said. "They speak of a time of great testing for our order, of betrayal from within and persecution from without, but also of a hidden truth, one we were charged to protect at our founding." The commander's voice was heavy with purpose. "Our order has always been more than simple warrior monks. We are guardians of mysteries beyond common understanding. These pilgrims, their backward prayers are showing us something. Something we were meant to remember." That night, Thomas stood at his post, watching the snow fall beyond the hospice walls. The backward prayers had become a constant drone, rising and falling like waves against a distant shore. All the affected pilgrims lay rigid in their pallets. Hands pointed eastward, speaking their reversed messages into the darkness. He thought of the symbols burned into stone and wood, of the prophecies hidden in ancient texts. The order had always known their mission went deeper than guarding pilgrims and fighting in foreign lands. They were keepers of sacred knowledge, protectors of mysteries passed down through generations of knights. Now those mysteries were speaking through common travelers, burning warnings into the very stones of their sanctuary. Each backward prayer, each mysterious symbol, was another piece of a divine message, one that suggested the order's greatest trials still lay ahead. The pilgrim's prophecy became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed it firsthand never forgot the sound of those reversed prayers, or the way they pointed toward distant lands where the order's fate would ultimately be decided. For they were the Knights Templar, and their duty was to stand guard not just over earthly pilgrims, but over mysteries that bridged the gap between heaven and earth. Even when those mysteries spoke through the mouths of common travelers, warning of shadows yet to come. Story 3. Commander Adrian first noticed the blood during morning prayers. A single crimson droplet, falling from the red cross sewn onto his white mantle. At first, he thought it was a trick of the candlelight, or perhaps wine spilled during communion. But as he touched the fabric, the liquid was warm and fresh. The fortress chapel fell silent as other knights noticed their commander's disturbance. Brother Michael, closest to Adrian, leaned forward to examine the cross. "Commander," he whispered, "your cross. It weeps." In the flickering light of 100 candles, more drops formed along the edges of the crimson symbol. They ran down the white fabric like tears, but left no stain in their wake. The blood vanished as it fell, as if it had never existed. Adrian maintained his composure, finishing the morning prayers before calling his senior knights to council. In the commander's chamber, torch flames cast dancing shadows across stone walls covered in maps and battle plans. The bleeding cross continued its mysterious weeping as 12 veteran Templars gathered around the heavy oak table. "In all my years serving the order, I've never witnessed such a thing," said Brother Thomas, the eldest among them. His weathered hands traced the ancient texts spread before him. "But there are records. Whispers of similar occurrences." The chamber's air grew thick with incense as Brother Gabriel, their scholar, unrolled a series of fragile scrolls. These documents speak of bleeding crosses appearing before moments of great significance for our order. His finger traced lines of faded text. They're considered signs, warnings of trials to come. Over the next 3 days, more crosses began to weep. Always during prayer times, always on the mantles of knights with unblemished records of service. The blood formed patterns as it fell, creating intricate symbols on the chapel floor that matched no known script. Brother Gabriel spent sleepless nights in the fortress library, comparing the mysterious markings to ancient texts. The symbols seemed to blend elements of different holy languages, forming messages that both attracted and repelled the eye. During evening prayers on the fourth day, Commander Adrian noticed something new. The blood drops were falling in perfect synchronization, creating a soft rhythm that matched the knight's chanted prayers. The symbols formed on the floor began to shift and change, flowing like water to create new patterns. "These are Byzantine symbols," Brother Gabriel announced, his voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "But they're arranged in ways I've never seen. They speak of judgment, of trials, of a marking of the worthy." The bleeding crosses drew pilgrims and travelers to the fortress gates, speaking of rumors that miracles were occurring within. Commander Adrian ordered the gates sealed, allowing none to enter or leave without direct permission. The order's secrets had to be maintained. In the underground chapel, where the most sacred relics were kept, the bleeding became more pronounced. Drops of blood formed celestial patterns on the ancient stone floor, matching the alignment of stars described in prophetic texts. The air hummed with unseen energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. During the night watch, knights reported hearing whispered prayers in their minds, matching the rhythm of the falling drops. The sounds of ghostly battle hymns echoed through empty corridors, growing stronger as the moon rose over the fortress walls. Commander Adrian called another council, this time in the sacred vault beneath the chapel. Senior knights stood in a circle around an ancient altar, their bleeding crosses pulsing in unison like beating hearts. "Brothers," Adrian said, his voice steady despite the strangeness surrounding them, "we face a divine mystery. Our very symbols have come alive, marking us for some greater purpose." Single quotes. Brother Gabriel spread his research across the altar stone. "The patterns speak of a coming trial," he explained. "The blood forms words from prophecies scattered throughout our most ancient texts. We're being warned and prepared." The knights listened in silence as Gabriel read from his translations. The messages spoke of a time when the Order would face its greatest test, not from earthly enemies, but from forces that would shake the very foundations of their faith. As if responding to the scholar's words, the crosses began to weep more heavily. The blood formed new patterns, showing visions of battles yet to come and trials yet to be faced. Each knight saw something different in the flowing symbols, but all felt the weight of destiny settling upon their shoulders. That night, Commander Adrian stood alone in the highest tower, watching the moon rise over distant hills. His cross continued its mysterious weeping, each drop carrying messages he was only beginning to understand. The fortress below hummed with prayer as knights maintained their vigils, their bleeding crosses marking them as chosen witnesses to whatever was to come. The phenomenon spread to other Templar strongholds, each bleeding cross adding new layers to the prophetic message. Senior knights exchanged coded messages, sharing fragments of the visions granted by the flowing blood. A pattern emerged, a warning of events that would test not just their swords, but the very core of their faith. In the weeks that followed, the bleeding crosses became a constant reminder of their sacred duty. The blood never stained, never dried, but continued its mysterious flow during times of prayer. The symbols it formed grew more complex, revealing layers of meaning that Brother Gabriel worked tirelessly to decode. The knights accepted this divine marking with characteristic stoicism, incorporating the bleeding crosses into their daily rituals. They understood that they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound, something that would reshape their order's destiny. Commander Adrian often returned to the high tower at night, contemplating the weight of the message they'd been given. The bleeding crosses were both blessing and burden, marking them for trials yet to come. In the end, that was the true nature of their calling, to stand as guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries that bridged the gap between heaven and earth. And still the crosses wept their mysterious blood, each drop carrying messages of what was to come. The knights maintained their watch, knowing they had been marked for a purpose beyond their understanding. For they were the Knights Templar, and this was their sacred duty, to bear witness to divine mysteries, even when those mysteries manifested in their very flesh and blood. Story 4. The whispers began in the deepest chamber of the ancient temple, where shadows danced on walls that had stood since time immemorial. Brother Marcus heard them first during his midnight watch, soft murmurs in ancient Hebrew that seemed to rise from the very stones themselves. At first, he thought it was just the wind finding its way through ancient corridors, or perhaps his mind playing tricks after too many hours in the torchlit darkness. But then the whispers formed words, clear and purposeful, speaking of things that made his blood run cold. The massive chamber, with its towering columns and mysterious carvings, had been under Templar protection for generations. Their duty was to guard its secrets, though few knew exactly what those secrets were. Tonight, it seemed, the secrets were speaking for themselves. Brother Marcus, the voice of Commander William broke through his thoughts. You seem troubled. Marcus turned to his commander, the older knight's armor gleaming dully in the torchlight. Listen, he whispered. The stones, they're speaking. Both men stood in silence as the whispers grew stronger, echoing off ancient walls. The words were in Hebrew, but somehow Marcus understood them, though he'd never learned the language. They spoke of trials to come, of betrayals yet unfold, of a destiny written in stone long before the Order's founding. Commander William's face grew grave. Summon the others, he ordered. All knights currently in the temple complex. We must witness this together. As more Templars gathered in the vast chamber, the whispers multiplied. Each knight heard them differently, some in Hebrew, others in Greek or Latin, but all understood the messages. They spoke of the Order's future, of trials and tribulations yet to come, of a betrayal that would shake their very foundations. Brother Thomas, the temple's scholar, arrived with an armful of sealed documents. His hands trembled as he unrolled the ancient scrolls on a stone table. These texts, he said, his voice hushed, they speak of this, of a time when the ancient king's wisdom would echo through his temple, warning those chosen to guard its secrets. The whispers grew stronger as he spoke, as if acknowledging the truth of his words. The very air seemed to vibrate with unseen energy, making torch flames dance and armor rattle softly. Through the night, more knights arrived, drawn by an inexplicable urging. Each added their own account of what they heard in the whispers, fragments of prophecy, pieces of a larger message that Brother Thomas frantically recorded on fresh parchment. Commander William ordered the temple sealed, allowing none to enter or leave without direct permission. The whispers had to remain secret, another mystery for the Order to guard. In the days that followed, the phenomenon spread through the temple complex. The whispers grew stronger during prayer times, forming harmonies with the knights' chanted psalms. They seemed to respond to certain rituals, growing louder or softer depending on the ceremonies being performed. Brother Thomas rarely left the temple's library, comparing the whispered messages to ancient texts. These prophecies, he explained to the commander, they match fragments found in sealed documents dating back to our Order's founding. But they're more complete now, more urgent. The whispers spoke of specific dates, of places yet unvisited, of battles yet to be fought. They warned of enemies both external and internal, of trials that would test not just the Order's swords, but their very faith. During the third week, the first symbols appeared. Knights on watch noticed strange markings forming in the temple dust, matching no known script, yet somehow readable to all who saw them. The symbols shifted and changed, forming new messages that matched the whispered prophecies. Commander William gathered his senior knights in the temple's sacred inner chamber, where the whispers were strongest. Incense smoke coiled around ancient columns as he addressed his men. "Brothers," he said, his voice steady despite the supernatural manifestations surrounding them. "We stand at a crossroads of prophecy. These whispers, these symbols, they're not just warnings, they're preparations." Brother Thomas spread his translations across a stone altar. "The messages speak of a time of great testing for our order," he explained. "A time when our true purpose will be revealed, and our worthiness to guard these ancient secrets will be judged." The whispers rose in intensity as he spoke, as if confirming his words. Knights felt their armor vibrate with unseen energy, heard their sword blades humming in their scabbards. That night, Commander William kept solitary vigil in the deepest chamber. The whispers surrounded him like a chorus, speaking of things both wonderful and terrible. He understood now why this temple had been placed under Templar protection, why their order had been chosen for this sacred duty. The whispers continued their prophetic chorus, growing stronger with each passing night. Knights maintained constant vigil, recording every message, every symbol that appeared in the ancient dust. Each piece added to a larger picture, a divine warning of trials to come. Brother Thomas worked tirelessly to decode the full meaning of the messages, comparing them to the Order's most secret documents. The whispers spoke of a destiny written in stone ages ago, of a role the Templars would play in events yet to unfold. In the weeks that followed, the phenomenon became part of temple life. Knights learned to distinguish different types of whispers, those that warned, those that prophesied, those that revealed ancient secrets. The messages formed patterns that matched astronomical alignments and sacred geometries described in their oldest texts. Commander William often returned to the deep chamber where the whispers had first been heard. The messages they carried were both blessing and burden, marking the Order for a purpose beyond their current understanding. The whispers of Solomon's Temple became another secret for the Templars to guard, another mystery to protect. But those who had heard them firsthand never forgot their messages, or the weight of destiny they carried. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries that stretched back to the dawn of time. And now those mysteries were speaking, warning of shadows yet to come, preparing them for trials that would test the very foundations of their faith. The ancient king's wisdom continued to echo through stone corridors, each whisper a thread in a tapestry of prophecy. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between past and future, between heaven and earth. Story 5. The discovery came during the fortress expansion, as knights supervised the deepening of the ancient foundations. Brother Daniel noticed it first, a sealed doorway of weathered stone, marked with symbols that seemed to shift in the torchlight. No records mentioned this chamber. The fortress had stood for generations, yet somehow this section of the underground complex had remained hidden, waiting. Commander Richard stood before the sealed entrance, studying the mysterious markings with narrowed eyes. "Bring Brother Thomas," he ordered. We'll need his expertise before we proceed. The elderly scholar arrived with an armload of manuscripts, his white mantle swaying in the underground draft. As he examined the door's symbols, his expression grew increasingly troubled. "These markings," he whispered, "they're unlike anything in our records. Yet somehow, I feel I should know them." The decision to open the tomb came after hours of deliberation. As the knights gathered in the torchlit passage, Brother Thomas led them in prayers of protection. The air grew thick with incense as sacred words echoed off ancient stones. The seal broke with a sound like distant thunder. What they found beyond the doorway defied explanation. The chamber was perfectly circular, its walls covered in symbols that seemed to pulse with their own inner light. At its center stood a simple stone sarcophagus, unmarked except for a single symbol that matched none known to the order. "Look at your mantles," Brother Michael gasped. In the strange light of the chamber, the knights' white mantles had begun to glow. Golden script appeared on the fabric, flowing like water across the white cloth. Each mantle bore different writings, yet all seemed to be parts of a larger message. Commander Richard ordered the chamber sealed again, accessible only to full knights of proven faith. Brother Thomas established a continuous vigil, with pairs of knights praying in shifts before the mysterious sarcophagus. The golden writings appeared only within the chamber, fading as soon as the knights stepped outside. But each time they returned, new messages formed on their mantles, telling fragments of an ancient prophecy. These texts, Brother Thomas explained during an emergency council, they speak of a forgotten duty. Something the order was charged with at its founding. Something we were meant to remember. More knights were drawn to the chamber, each adding new pieces to the mysterious message. The golden script seemed to choose carefully, appearing only on the mantles of those with the purest hearts and strongest faith. During midnight prayers, the chamber filled with an otherworldly chorus as knights chanted ancient hymns. The golden writings pulsed in rhythm with their voices, forming patterns that matched astronomical charts in the order's oldest manuscripts. Commander Richard spent long hours in the chamber, reading the ever-changing messages that appeared on his mantle. "Brothers," he announced during evening prayers, "we're being reminded of something. Something vital to our order's true purpose." Brother Thomas worked tirelessly to translate the golden script, comparing it to sealed texts from the order's archives. "The writings speak of a choice," he reported. "A moment when our order will face its greatest trial, when we must remember this forgotten duty or face dissolution." The phenomenon spread beyond the original chamber. Knights reported their mantles glowing faintly during prayer times, showing fragments of the same mysterious text. Each piece added to a growing prophecy that both inspired and terrified. 1 month after the chamber's discovery, during a night of particular spiritual significance, the sarcophagus itself began to glow. The golden light pulsed like a heartbeat, causing the writings on the knights' mantles to shift and change more rapidly. Commander Richard called all available knights to witness. They gathered in the circular chamber, their glowing mantles creating a display of moving text that covered every surface. The air hummed with unseen energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. "Brothers," the commander's voice cut through the supernatural display, "we stand at a crossroads of prophecy. Our order was founded not just to fight earthly battles, but to guard mysteries beyond common understanding. This chamber, these messages, they're reminding us of our highest calling." Brother Thomas spread his translations across a stone altar. The golden script flowed across the knights' mantles as he read, confirming or correcting his interpretations. The prophecy spoke of trials to come, of a time when the order would face enemies, both spiritual and temporal. but it also spoke of hope, of nights marked by divine favor, chosen to remember what others had forgotten. The glowing mantles were both blessing and burden, marking their wearers for a purpose beyond their current understanding. In the weeks that followed, the chamber became a place of continuous prayer and contemplation. Knights took turns maintaining vigil, watching as new messages formed on their mantles, adding to the growing prophecy. Commander Richard often returned to stand before the mysterious sarcophagus, reading the golden messages that flowed across his mantle. He understood now that the chamber's discovery was no accident. It was a reminder of duties and destinies long forgotten. The mystery of the broken seal became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed it firsthand never forgot the sight of those glowing mantles, or the weight of the prophecy they revealed. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries that stretched back to the Order's founding. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The golden script continued its mysterious dance across white mantles, each word a thread in a tapestry of prophecy. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between past and future, between heaven and earth. And still, the chamber pulsed with its strange light, calling worthy knights to witness its mysteries. For some seals, once broken, can never be restored, and some truths, once revealed, must be guarded until time itself comes to an end. Story 6. Brother Simon first noticed the golden tears during his midnight prayers in the fortress chapel. They fell from the eyes of an ancient statue, each drop catching the candlelight like liquid sunlight. The statue, carved from white marble centuries ago, had stood in this small chapel since the fortress's founding, but it had never wept before. The golden tears fell in perfect rhythm, forming intricate patterns on the stone floor beneath. Simon watched, transfixed, as the droplets began to move of their own accord, flowing together to create symbols he'd never seen before. "Commander," he called softly, knowing Robert would still be awake in his nearby chamber. "You need to see this." Commander Robert arrived moments later, his white mantle ghost-like in the chapel's dim light. Other knights followed, drawn by some unseen force to witness the phenomenon. The golden tears continued their mysterious dance across the floor, forming patterns that seemed to pulse with inner light. "Brother Thomas," the commander ordered, "bring the ancient texts. These symbols, they remind me of something I've seen in our sealed records." The elderly scholar hurried to the library, returning with arms full of weathered manuscripts. As he spread them across the chapel's stone altar, the golden tears began flowing with greater urgency, as if responding to the presence of the sacred texts. "Here," Thomas whispered, pointing to a faded illustration. "These patterns, they match prophecies recorded during our order's founding. They speak of a time when sacred statues would weep precious metals, marking the path to hidden knowledge." The knights watched in silence as the golden tears formed what appeared to be a map, showing passages and chambers beneath the fortress that appeared in no official plans. Commander Robert ordered an immediate expedition to follow the golden trail. "Brother Simon, Brother Michael, you'll accompany me," he said. "The rest maintain vigil here. Brother Thomas, continue comparing these patterns to our records." The three knights descended into the fortress depths, following stairs and corridors that grew progressively older. The air grew thick with the weight of centuries, and their torch flames cast dancing shadows on walls carved with symbols that matched those formed by the golden tears above. They found the hidden chamber exactly where the liquid map had indicated. An ancient door, sealed with markings that seemed to shift in the torchlight, blocked their path. As they studied the door, more golden tears began falling from the ceiling, forming new patterns that matched the door's mysterious script. "It's showing us how to enter," Michael whispered. "The tears, they're teaching us." Following the golden guidance, they pressed specific symbols in a precise sequence. The door opened with a sound like distant bells, revealing a chamber that defied explanation. The circular room was lined with niches, each containing artifacts that pulsed with strange light. At its center stood an altar of pure white stone, unmarked except for a single symbol that matched the one formed by the first golden tears. Back in the chapel, the statue's weeping had intensified. Brother Thomas worked feverishly to translate the patterns still forming on the floor, comparing them to the Order's most sacred texts. These messages, he reported to the gathered knights, they speak of a hidden archive. Knowledge entrusted to our Order at its founding. Knowledge we were meant to protect until a specific time. Commander Robert ordered continuous prayer vigils in both the chapel and the newly discovered chamber. Knights took turns maintaining watch, recording every pattern formed by the golden tears. Each new symbol added another piece to a growing prophecy. During evening prayers 3 days later, the phenomenon escalated. Golden tears began falling from every sacred image in the chapel, their patterns forming a complex narrative across the floor. The very air seemed charged with divine energy, making armor vibrate and sword blades hum in their scabbards. "Brothers," Commander Robert addressed his assembled knights, "we stand at a crossroads of prophecy. These golden tears are more than mere manifestations. They're messages, markers pointing us toward knowledge we were meant to remember." Brother Thomas spread his translations across the altar. The golden patterns shifted as he read, confirming or correcting his interpretations. The prophecy spoke of trials to come, of knowledge that would test not just the Order's swords, but their very faith. In the underground chamber, the artifacts in their niches began to react to the prayers above. Each piece pulsed with light that matched the rhythm of the falling tears, creating harmonies of light and shadow that formed their own messages. Commander Robert spent long hours studying both the chapel patterns and the chamber's revelations. The golden tears were showing them something vital to their Order's true purpose. Each pattern, each pulsing light, added another layer to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. The phenomenon spread to other sacred images throughout the fortress. Golden tears fell during prayer times, forming patterns that matched astronomical alignments and sacred geometries described in their oldest texts. Knights maintained constant vigil, recording every message, every symbol that appeared. Brother Thomas worked tirelessly to decode the full meaning of the patterns, comparing them to the Order's most secret documents. The tears spoke of a destiny written in precious metals, of a role the Templars would play in events yet to unfold. In the weeks that followed, the golden tears became part of fortress life. Knights learned to read different patterns, those that warned, those that prophesied, those that revealed ancient secrets. The messages formed a tapestry of divine communication that both inspired and terrified. Commander Robert often returned to the underground chamber, watching as golden tears formed new patterns on its ancient altar. The messages they carried were both blessing and burden, marking the Order for a purpose beyond their current understanding. The mystery of the Virgin's tears became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed it firsthand never forgot the sight of that liquid gold, or the weight of the prophecy it revealed. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries that flowed like golden tears from heaven itself. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen nights with messages of what was to come. The golden tears continued their mysterious dance across stone floors, each drop a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, written in tears of precious gold. Story 7. Brother Marcus noticed it first during his dawn prayers atop the monastery's eastern wall. Every shadow, from the towering battlements to the smallest pebble, pointed perfectly toward the holy city. It defied nature itself, as if some unseen force had seized control of light and darkness. He blinked, certain his eyes were playing tricks after another sleepless night of guard duty. But when he opened them again, the shadows remained fixed, like arrows on a divine compass. "Brother Thomas," he called to the senior knight passing below. "Look at the shadows." Thomas stopped, his armor catching the early light. His face paled as he observed the impossible alignment. Without a word, he turned and strode toward the commander's quarters. Commander Richard was already awake, poring over ancient manuscripts in his study. The room smelled of burning herbs and old parchment, walls lined with maps and astronomical charts. He listened gravely to their report. "Show me," he ordered, following them to the wall. The commander stood in silence, watching as more knights gathered to witness the phenomenon. Each new shadow that formed as the sun rose maintained the perfect alignment, pointing toward distant lands where their order had first taken root. "Brother Gabriel," he called to their scholar knight, "bring the sealed texts, the ones speaking of signs and portents." The elderly knight hurried to the library, returning with carefully wrapped scrolls. As he unrolled them on a stone merlon, the shadows seemed to deepen, as if straining to touch the ancient parchment. "Here," Gabriel whispered, pointing to faded text. "These writings speak of a sacred hour, when shadows would defy nature to mark the beginning of a divine countdown." The commander ordered immediate preparations. Knights arranged themselves at key points throughout the monastery, observing and recording every shadow's position. Brother Gabriel worked frantically to translate more of the ancient prophecies. As Easter approached, the phenomenon intensified. The aligned shadows began forming words in ancient Aramaic, writing messages across stone walls and courtyard floors. Each dawn brought new revelations, new warnings that sent Brother Gabriel hurrying back to his texts. "The prophecies speak truth," he reported during an emergency council. "These shadow messages match fragments found in our oldest documents. They warn of events to come, trials our order must face." Commander Richard stood at the head of the chapter house table, his face grave in the torchlight. Around him, senior knights listened as Brother Gabriel read from his translations. "The shadows speak of a time of testing," the scholar explained. "A period when our orders, faith, and purpose will be challenged. These signs are a countdown, marking days until we must make a choice that will determine our fate." The phenomenon spread to other Templar strongholds. Messengers arrived bearing reports of similar occurrences, shadows pointing true at dawn, forming words in ancient tongues. Each location added new pieces to the prophetic message. During midnight prayers, knights maintained vigil in the monastery chapel. Countless candles cast their own shadows, all aligned with perfect precision. The very air seemed charged with divine energy, making armor vibrate and sword blades hum in their scabbards. Brother Gabriel spent sleepless nights comparing the shadow messages to sealed documents from their archives. Patterns emerged, references to astronomical alignments, sacred geometries, and events yet to unfold. These aren't just warnings, he told the commander. They're instructions, preparations for whatever awaits us when the countdown ends. As the sacred hour approached each dawn, knights gathered on the walls to witness the writing. The messages grew more specific, speaking of choices and consequences that would shake their order's foundations. Commander Richard ordered continuous prayer vigils, with knights rotating through shifts to maintain constant spiritual readiness. The shadow messages responded to their prayers, forming new patterns that matched ritual gestures described in their oldest texts. The air grew thick with incense as knights performed ancient ceremonies, watching as their shadows formed harmonies with the mysterious writings. Each new day brought them closer to whatever moment the countdown marked. 1 week before Easter, during the sacred hour, the shadows began forming images as well as words. Knights watched in awe as scenes of battles yet to be fought played out in darkness across monastery walls. The time approaches, Brother Gabriel announced during evening prayers. The shadows show us not just what will come, but how we must prepare. Each message is another piece of divine armor, strengthening us for trials ahead. Commander Richard spent long hours in private prayer, studying the shadow messages that formed around him. The countdown was more than warning. It was preparation, marking chosen knights for a purpose beyond their current understanding. In the final days, the phenomenon reached its peak. During the sacred hour, shadows danced across every surface, forming complex patterns that matched prophecies sealed away centuries ago. The very stones seemed to pulse with divine energy. Knights maintained their vigils, watching as each dawn brought new revelations. The shadow messages spoke of destiny and duty, of trials that would test not just their swords but their very souls. The mystery of the sacred hour became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed it firsthand never forgot how shadows defied nature to deliver their warnings. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in light and shadow. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The shadows continued their mysterious dance, each dawn, each alignment, another word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling: to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, written in darkness that defied the very sun. Story 8. Brother Adrian first saw the blue flames during evening prayers. They danced along his sword blade like St. Elmo's fire, casting an otherworldly glow that only he could see. The weapon, carried through 3 campaigns and blessed by the Order's chaplain, had never shown such properties before. He kept silent at first, watching as the mysterious fire traced patterns along the steel, ancient symbols that seemed familiar yet unreadable. The flames brought no heat, but their light pulsed in rhythm with the knights' chanted prayers. "Something troubles you, Brother Adrian." Commander Stephen's voice cut through his thoughts after the service. "My sword, Commander, it burns with blue fire, though I seem to be the only one who sees it." The commander's expression grew grave. "Show me where you keep your blade at night." In the fortress armory, rows of blessed weapons hung in perfect order, each marked with its owner's symbols. Adrian's sword pulsed with ethereal flames as they approached, the blue light casting strange shadows on ancient stone walls. "I've seen this before," Commander Stephen whispered. "Or rather, I've read of it." Brother Thomas, the elderly scholar, arrived quickly, arms laden with sealed documents from the Order's archives. As he spread them across a wooden table, other knights began filtering into the armory, drawn by some unseen force. "Here," Thomas said, pointing to a weathered page. "Accounts from our founding speak of sacred flames appearing on knights' weapons. Each color held meaning. Blue for wisdom, gold for judgment, white for..." His voice trailed off as more gasps filled the room. Other knights were seeing their own flames now, different colors dancing along different blades. Each weapon burned with its own unique fire, visible only to its rightful wielder. Commander Stephen called an immediate council in the chapter house. Knights filled the torchlit chamber, their burning weapons creating a display of supernatural light, visible only to those marked to see it. "Brothers," the commander addressed them, "we face a mystery rooted in our order's deepest foundations. These flames are more than mere signs, they're markers, preparing us for what's to come." Brother Thomas worked through the night, comparing the flame patterns to ancient prophecies. The symbols traced by the fires matched fragments found in sealed texts, forming messages that both inspired and terrified. During morning prayers, the phenomenon intensified. The sacred flames burned brighter, moving in harmony with the night's chants. Each color formed its own patterns, telling different parts of a larger prophecy. "The texts speak of divine weapons," Brother Thomas reported. "Swords marked by sacred fire before times of great trial. Each color represents a different aspect of the testing to come." Knights began reporting dreams, visions shared through their burning blades. They saw battles yet to be fought, choices yet to be made. Each dream added another piece to the growing prophecy. Commander Stephen ordered continuous prayer vigils, with knights maintaining watch over their burning weapons. The flames responded to their devotions, forming new patterns that matched ritual gestures described in their oldest manuscripts. The fortress chapel filled with the smell of incense as knights performed ancient ceremonies. Their flames burned in complex harmonies, creating patterns that Brother Thomas frantically recorded. Each new symbol deepened their understanding of what was to come. During midnight prayers 1 week later, all the marked blades blazed at once. Their combined light filled the chapel with impossible colors, each flame telling its part of the prophecy. The very air hummed with divine energy. "Brothers," Commander Stephen's voice cut through the supernatural display, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. Our weapons have become more than steel. They're instruments of divine will, marking us for a purpose we're only beginning to understand." Brother Thomas spread his translations across the altar. The flames shifted as he read, confirming or correcting his interpretations. The prophecy spoke of trials to come, of battles that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. In the weeks that followed, more weapons throughout the order began to burn. Each new flame added its voice to the prophecy, its color marking its bearer for a specific role in events yet to unfold. Knights learned to read their flames like living texts, understanding the messages hidden in each pattern. The fires spoke of destiny and duty, of choices that would determine the order's fate. Commander Stephen spent long hours in private meditation, watching the blue flames dance along his own blade. Each pattern, each pulsing light, carried warnings of trials to come and promises of guidance for those true to their vows. During evening prayers, the knights would gather in the chapel, their burning weapons creating a symphony of sacred light. The flames moved in harmony with their chants, forming messages that Brother Thomas compared to the Order's most secret texts. The mystery of the burning blades became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who carried the marked weapons never forgot their first sight of those sacred flames. or the weight of prophecy they carried. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in fire on blessed steel. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The flames continued their mysterious dance along consecrated blades, each color a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, written in fires that burned without heat on sacred steel. Story 9. The first toll came at midnight, deep and resonant, though the fortress chapel's great bell hung motionless in its tower. Brother Michael stood frozen at his post, staring up at the massive bronze form suspended in darkness. The rope hung slack, untouched, yet the sound rolled out across the sleeping fortress like distant thunder. No one else seemed to hear it. The night watch continued their rounds, oblivious to the impossible ringing that made Michael's bones vibrate with each strike. When the second toll came the following night, Brother James heard it too. The two knights met in the chapel courtyard, watching the still bell as it sang its phantom song. "It speaks of something," James whispered. "Listen to the pattern. It's trying to tell us something." Commander William found them there, drawn by some unseen force to witness the phenomenon. The bell's voice grew stronger in his presence, its message becoming clearer with each resonant strike. "Gather the senior knights," he ordered, "and bring Brother Thomas from the library. These sounds, they remind me of prophecies in our sealed texts." The elderly scholar arrived with an armload of ancient manuscripts, just as the bell began forming words within its phantom tolling. The sounds wove together into messages that echoed through the knights' minds, though the great bronze form remained perfectly still. "Here," Thomas said, spreading weathered pages across the chapel altar. "Records from our founding speak of singing bells, harbingers that would call out warnings when great changes approached." More knights began hearing the phantom tolls each night. Different brothers caught different fragments of the message, each piece adding to a growing prophecy. The very air seemed charged with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades hum in their scabbards. During evening prayers 1 week later, glowing text appeared on the chapel walls, visible only during the ghostly rings. The writing matched no known script, yet each knight who saw it understood its meaning differently. Commander William ordered continuous vigils in the chapel, with knights rotating through prayer shifts as Brother Thomas worked to decode the bell's messages. The phantom tolls grew stronger during these ceremonies, forming harmonies with the knights' chanted psalms. "The messages speak of a sacred duty," Thomas reported during an emergency council. "Something our order was charged with at its founding, something we've begun to forget." The phenomenon spread throughout the fortress. During the phantom tolls, more glowing text appeared on walls and floors, forming patterns that matched astronomical charts in their oldest manuscripts. Each new message added another layer to the mystery. Commander Williams spent long hours in the chapel, listening as the bell sang its warnings into the darkness. The messages spoke of trials to come, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. In the fortress library, Brother Thomas compared the glowing texts to sealed documents from their archives. Patterns emerged, prophecies handed down through generations of knights, speaking of a time when bronze tongues would ring out destiny's approach. During midnight prayers, 2 weeks after the first toll, the phenomenon reached its peak. The phantom ringing filled the entire fortress, each note carrying different messages to different knights. The glowing writings covered every surface, forming a tapestry of prophecy that both inspired and terrified. Brothers, Commander William addressed his assembled knights, we stand at a crossroads of divine will. These bells, these messages, they're not just warnings, they're reminders of who we truly are, of duties we were meant to fulfill. Brother Thomas spread his translations across the chapel altar. The bell's song shifted as he read, confirming or correcting his interpretations. Each toll added another piece to a prophecy that stretched back to their order's founding. Knights maintained their vigils, recording every message, every symbol that appeared during the phantom rings. The glowing text formed patterns that matched sacred geometries described in their oldest texts. Speaking of mysteries beyond common understanding, the messages grew more specific as holy days approached. The bells sang of betrayals yet to come, of trials that would shake their order's foundations. Each note carried warnings of events yet to unfold, marking chosen knights for roles in the approaching drama. Commander William often returned to the bell tower alone, listening as the phantom tolls painted pictures in his mind. The messages they carried were both blessing and burden, marking the order for a purpose beyond their current understanding. In the weeks that followed, the phenomenon became part of fortress life. Knights learned to distinguish different types of tolls, those that warned, those that prophesied, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each ring added another thread to a tapestry of divine communication. Brother Thomas worked tirelessly to decode the full meaning of the messages, comparing them to the Order's most secret documents. The bell spoke of a destiny written in bronze, of a role the Templars would play in events yet to unfold. The mystery of the silent bell became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torch-lit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had heard its phantom song never forgot the weight of the prophecy it revealed. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries that rang out from silent bronze. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The phantom tolls continued their midnight warnings, each ring a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, spoken by bells that rang without movement in the darkness. Story 10. Brother Marcus stood his midnight watch in the sacred vault, torch casting shadows across walls that held secrets older than the Order itself. The ancient chamber lay deep beneath the fortress, accessible only to full knights, who had proven their worth through years of service. The first apparition appeared as the bells tolled midnight, a ghostly figure in the regalia of a Templar, Grand Master from ages past. The spirit made no sound, but its gestures were deliberate and precise, forming patterns Marcus had never seen yet somehow recognized. He maintained his composure, watching as the figure performed what appeared to be an ancient ritual. Each movement seemed laden with meaning, though its purpose remained unclear. When the apparition faded, Marcus could still feel its presence lingering in the vault's thick air. Commander Richard must know of this, he whispered to himself, but something told him to wait, to watch, to learn. The next night brought another Grand Master's ghost, performing different gestures that somehow complemented the first night's ritual. Brother Thomas, sharing the watch, saw it too. These movements, Thomas whispered, they match descriptions in our oldest texts. Sacred ceremonies we've forgotten how to perform. Within a week, more knights on vault duty began witnessing the apparitions. Each ghost performed its own part of what was clearly a larger ceremony, building complexity night by night. The very air grew thick with supernatural energy that made torch flames dance and armor vibrate with unseen power. Commander Richard called an emergency council in the chamber above the vault. Senior knights gathered around a table laden with ancient manuscripts as Brother Gabriel, their scholar, searched for explanations. "Here," Gabriel said, indicating a weathered page. "Accounts from our founding speak of spirits, of past leaders, returning to teach forgotten rites. Always in times of great need, when the Order faced its greatest trials." The commander's face grew grave in the torchlight. "Show me the patterns they form. Compare them to our sealed records." As more knights witnessed the apparitions, patterns emerged in their reports. Each ghost's movements contributed to what appeared to be an immensely complex ritual, one that existed in fragments throughout their most sacred texts. During midnight prayers, the phenomenon intensified. Multiple spirits appeared simultaneously, their phantom forms glowing with inner light as they demonstrated their parts of the mysterious ceremony. The vault's ancient stones seemed to pulse with energy. "The ghosts are teaching us something," Brother Gabriel reported after another sleepless night of research. "A ritual mentioned in our founding documents. One we were meant to perform when specific signs appeared." Commander Richard ordered continuous vigils in the vault, with knights working in pairs to record every gesture, every pattern formed by the spectral teachers. The apparitions responded to their attention, their movements becoming clearer, more purposeful. The air grew thick with incense as knights maintained their guard duty, watching as generations of past leaders enacted their phantom lesson. Each night added new complexity to the ritual, new patterns that matched prophecies sealed away centuries ago. During the third week, knights began reporting shared dreams, visions of ancient ceremonies performed in places of power. Each dream added another layer of understanding to the ghostly instructions being performed in the vault. "These aren't just random spirits," Brother Gabriel announced during evening prayers. "They're chosen teachers, returning to prepare us for something written in our oldest prophecies." Commander Richard spent long hours in private study, comparing the reported visions to sealed documents from their archives. Patterns emerged, references to astronomical alignments, sacred geometries, and events yet to unfold. The phenomenon reached its peak during a night of particular spiritual significance. The vault filled with ghostly light as dozens of past leaders appeared together, performing their parts of the ritual in perfect harmony. The very stones seemed to sing with power. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed his assembled knights, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These spirits have returned to teach us what was forgotten, rituals we'll need in the trials to come." Brother Gabriel spread his translations across an ancient altar. The apparitions shifted as he read, confirming or correcting his interpretations. Each phantom gesture added another piece to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. Knights maintained their vigils, recording every movement, every pattern formed by the spiritual teachers. The ghosts responded to their dedication, showing increasingly complex aspects of ceremonies lost to time. In the weeks that followed, the phenomenon became part of vault life. Knights learned to recognize different spirits, understanding how each one's teachings fitted into the larger ritual. The messages they carried were both blessing and burden, marking the Order for a purpose beyond their current understanding. Commander Richard often returned to the vault alone, watching as generations of past leaders performed their phantom lessons. Each gesture, each pattern, added another layer to a prophecy that both inspired and terrified. The mystery of the Guardian's Watch became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed the spectral teachings never forgot their first sight of those ancient masters, or the weight of the knowledge they brought. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries passed down through generations of ghostly teachers. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen nights with messages of what was to come. The apparitions continued their mysterious lessons each night, each gesture a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, taught by spirits who had carried those secrets in life and death alike. Story 11. Brother Thomas first heard the voices in the wind during his evening watch atop the mountain fortress's highest tower. The breeze carried whispers in multiple ancient languages, somehow speaking simultaneously yet remaining perfectly clear. Each voice told a different part of the same message, weaving together like threads in a tapestry of prophecy. He gripped his sword hilt tightly, certain his mind was playing tricks after too many solitary hours. But the voices persisted, growing stronger as darkness fell over the ancient stones. "Brother Marcus," he called to his fellow watchman, "do you hear it? The wind." Marcus nodded slowly, his face pale in the torchlight. "Languages I've never learned, yet somehow I understand them all." Single quotes by midnight, the phenomenon had grown stronger. The wind voices echoed through the fortress's corridors and chambers, speaking in tongues that hadn't been heard on Earth for centuries. Each gust brought new messages, new warnings of things to come. Commander Stephen found them still at their post, listening intently to the supernatural chorus. The old warrior's face grew grave as the voices spoke of ancient prophecies and approaching trials. "Summon Brother Gabriel," he ordered. "These messages match passages in our sealed texts." The elderly scholar arrived with arms full of weathered manuscripts, spreading them across a stone table in the tower room. As he worked, the voices in the wind seemed to respond, growing stronger when he touched certain texts. "Here," Gabriel said, pointing to faded script. "Prophecies from our founding speak of winds that would carry messages in ancient tongues, always before times of great trial for our order." More knights began hearing the voices as days passed. Each brother caught different fragments of the message, contributing pieces to a growing prophecy. During group prayers, the winds formed harmonies with their chants, creating supernatural choruses that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Commander Stephen called a council in the fortress chapel. Senior knights gathered around the altar as Brother Gabriel shared his findings. "The voices speak in patterns," the scholar explained. "Each language reveals different aspects of what's to come. Together, they form a complete message. One our order was meant to hear at this precise moment." The phenomenon intensified during sacred ceremonies. As knights performed ancient rituals, the wind voices grew stronger, their messages clearer. The very air seemed charged with supernatural energy that made torch flames dance and incense smoke form strange patterns. Brother Gabriel worked tirelessly to translate every message, comparing them to prophecies hidden in their archives. Patterns emerged, references to astronomical alignments, sacred geometries, and events yet to unfold. "These aren't just warnings," he told the commander. "They're instructions. Preparations for whatever trial awaits us when the prophecy unfolds." During midnight prayers 1 week later, the voices reached a crescendo. The wind spoke in dozens of ancient languages simultaneously, each one carrying part of a larger message that both inspired and terrified. "Brothers," Commander Stephen addressed his assembled knights, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These voices carry messages meant for our order alone, warnings of trials to come. but also promises of guidance for those true to their vows. The voices grew stronger during group prayer sessions, forming complex harmonies with the night's chanted psalms. Each song carried new fragments of prophecy, new hints of what awaited them. Brother Gabriel spent sleepless nights comparing the wind messages to sealed documents from their archives. The voices spoke of destiny and duty, of choices that would determine the order's fate. Knights maintained constant vigil, recording every message, every prophecy carried on the supernatural breeze. The winds responded to their dedication, revealing deeper layers of meaning that matched their most ancient texts. In the fortress library, Brother Gabriel discovered references to similar phenomena throughout their history. Always the voices came before moments of great significance for the order, marking chosen knights for roles in approaching trials. Commander Stephen often stood alone on the highest tower, listening as the wind spoke its prophecies into the night. Each message, each supernatural chorus, added another layer to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. During holy days, the phenomenon reached new intensity. The voices formed patterns that matched sacred geometries described in their oldest manuscripts, speaking of mysteries beyond common understanding. The wind messages spread to other Templar strongholds, each location adding new pieces to the prophetic puzzle. Senior knights exchanged coded letters, sharing fragments of the supernatural messages that grew clearer with each passing day. Knights learned to recognize different types of voices, those that warned, those that prophesied, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each breeze carried another thread of divine communication that both blessed and burdened its hearers. The mystery of the sacred wind became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had heard its messages never forgot how the very air had spoken to them, marking them for a purpose beyond their understanding. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries carried on supernatural winds. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The voices continued their ethereal chorus each night, each gust a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, spoken by winds that carried the wisdom of ages in their breath. Story 12. The first mark appeared during the ritual of evening prayer. Brother Marcus noticed it while removing his gauntlet, a strange symbol burning itself into the flesh of his sword hand. The marking seemed to glow from within, pulsing in rhythm with the chanted psalms. 11 other knights discovered similar marks that night, each unique yet somehow connected. Brother Thomas, the Order's healer, examined them with growing concern. "These are no ordinary burns," he whispered, tracing the glowing patterns. "They form letters in languages older than our Order itself." Commander Richard called an emergency council in the fortress chapel. 12 marked knights gathered before the altar, their supernatural brands casting strange shadows in the candlelight. Brother Gabriel, the commander, addressed their scholar, "Bring the sealed texts. These markings remind me of prophecies in our oldest documents." The elderly knight arrived with an armload of ancient manuscripts. As he spread them across the altar stone, the marks on the knight's hands flared brighter, as if recognizing something in the weathered pages. "Here," Gabriel said, pointing to faded illustrations. Similar marks appeared 2 nights before crucial moments in our Order's history. Their signs choosing those who must bear witness to what's coming. Over the next 3 days, the marks began to change. The symbols shifted and flowed like liquid fire beneath the skin, forming new patterns that matched fragments of ancient prophecies. Each change brought searing pain and new visions of events yet to unfold. During morning prayers, the marked knights found their brands glowing in harmony with their chanted hymns. The very air seemed charged with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Commander Richard ordered the marked ones to maintain constant prayer vigils. The brands responded to their devotions, revealing new layers of meaning that Brother Gabriel worked tirelessly to decode. "These aren't just random markings," he reported during an emergency council. "They're pieces of a larger message. A warning our order was meant to receive at this precise moment." The phenomenon intensified during sacred ceremonies. When the marked knights prayed together, their brands formed complex patterns that matched geometric prophecies hidden in their oldest texts. Each symbol carried fragments of visions that both inspired and terrified. Brother Gabriel spent sleepless nights comparing the marks to sealed documents from their archives. The symbols spoke of trials to come, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. In the fortress chapel, incense smoke coiled around columns as marked knights maintained their vigils. Their brands pulsed with inner light, casting ever-changing shadows that formed new messages on ancient stones. "The marks are spreading," Brother Thomas reported 1 week later. The supernatural brands had begun expanding across the knight's arms, each new symbol adding another piece to the prophetic puzzle. During midnight prayers, all 12 marks blazed simultaneously. The chapel filled with otherworldly light as the brands formed a complete message, one that Brother Gabriel recognized from the Order's most closely guarded prophecies. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed the marked ones, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These brands mark you as messengers, chosen to carry warnings of what's to come." The commander spent long hours studying the shifting symbols, comparing them to predictions sealed away centuries ago. Each new pattern confirmed their worst fears, while offering hope of divine guidance through the trials ahead. Knights maintaining night watch reported seeing the marked one's hands glowing in darkness, their brands forming patterns that matched the alignment of stars. The very stones of the fortress seemed to resonate with the supernatural energy emanating from their flesh. Brother Gabriel discovered references to similar occurrences throughout their history. Always 12 nights marked, always before moments of great significance for the Order. Their brands served as both warning and preparation for approaching trials. The marks responded differently during battle practice. When the chosen knights gripped their weapons, the symbols shifted to form ancient battle hymns and prayers for protection. Their sword hands blazed with inner fire that left no burn, yet marked them forever as witnesses. "These brands are both blessing and burden," Brother Thomas told the marked ones during evening prayers. "They mark you as messengers. But sharing the message carries its own price, Commander." Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but the most senior knights. The marks had to remain hidden, another mystery for the Order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the brands revealed new depths of prophecy. The symbols aligned with astronomical events described in their oldest manuscripts, speaking of trials that would shake the Order's very foundations. The marked knights learned to read their brands like living text, understanding how each shifting pattern added to the larger message. Their flesh had become a sacred manuscript, writing itself anew with each passing day. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in living flesh. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The brands continued their mysterious transformations each night, each symbol a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets wrote themselves in fire upon their very flesh. Story 13. Brother Marcus first saw the blue flames during Easter Vigil prayers. They danced along his sword blade like ghostly fire, casting an otherworldly glow across the ancient stones of the church. The weapon, blessed countless times in battle, had never shown such properties before. Other knights noticed their own weapons beginning to burn with the same supernatural fire. Each blade glowed with identical blue flame, yet produced no heat or smoke. The phenomenon spread through their ranks like a holy contagion, marking weapons one by one. Commander Richard stood before the altar, watching as his own sword erupted in azure light. The flames formed patterns that matched ancient symbols carved into the church walls, symbols that seemed to shift and change in the supernatural illumination. "Brother Thomas," he called to their scholar knight, "bring the sealed texts. These flames remind me of prophecies in our oldest records." The elderly knight hurried to the library, returning with carefully preserved manuscripts. As he spread them before the altar, the blue fires grew stronger, their light revealing hidden text written in the margins of ancient pages. "Here," Thomas whispered, pointing to faded illustrations. "Our founding documents speak of sacred flames appearing on Templar weapons before times of great trial. The markers, signs that our order faces divine judgment." The phenomenon intensified as Easter approached. During prayer vigils, the blue fires formed complex patterns that matched astronomical alignments described in their sealed texts. The very air seemed charged with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and blessed metal sing with otherworldly resonance. Commander Richard ordered continuous prayer watches, with knights maintaining vigil over their burning weapons. The flames responded to their devotions, revealing new symbols that Brother Thomas worked frantically to decode. "These aren't random manifestations," he reported during an emergency council. "The patterns match prophecies scattered throughout our archives, warnings of trials our order must face. In the church's sacred vault, where their most holy relics were kept, the blue fires grew even stronger." Knights on guard duty reported seeing the flames form images in darkness, visions of battles yet to be fought and choices yet to be made. During midnight prayers 1 week later, all the marked weapons blazed simultaneously. The church filled with supernatural light as the flames danced in perfect harmony with their chanted psalms. Each sword became a torch of holy fire, illuminating ancient stones with prophecy. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed his assembled knights, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These flames mark our weapons for a purpose, preparing us for trials that will test not just our steel, but our very souls." Brother Thomas spread his translations across the altar. The blue fires shifted as he read, confirming or correcting his interpretations. Each flame pattern added another piece to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. The phenomenon spread beyond their weapons. During sacred ceremonies, blue fire appeared on armor and shields, forming symbols that matched their oldest texts. Each new marking carried messages that both inspired and terrified. Knights maintaining night watch reported seeing their burning weapons move in concert, forming patterns that matched the movement of stars. The very stones of the church seemed to resonate with the supernatural energy emanating from their blessed steel. Commander Richard spent long hours in private meditation, watching the blue flames dance across his sword blade. Each pattern, each pulsing light, carried warnings of trials to come and promises of guidance for those true to their vows. Brother Thomas discovered references to similar occurrences throughout their history. always before moments of great significance, always marking weapons of knights chosen for crucial roles in events to come. The flames responded differently during battle practice. When knights crossed their burning blades, the blue fires formed new patterns, ancient battle prayers and hymns of protection written in living light. These manifestations are both blessing and burden, Brother Thomas told them during evening prayers. They mark us as chosen warriors, but that choice carries a price we're only beginning to understand. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The blue fires had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As Easter drew nearer, the flames revealed new depths of prophecy. The patterns aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, speaking of trials that would test the order's very foundations. Knights learned to read their burning weapons like living texts, understanding how each shifting flame added to the larger message. Their blessed steel had become sacred manuscripts, writing prophecy in fire with each passing day. The mystery of the holy fire became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who carried the burning weapons never forgot their first sight of those sacred flames, or the weight of destiny they carried. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in supernatural fire. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The blue flames continued their mysterious dance each night, each pattern a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets wrote themselves in fire upon their blessed steel. Story 14. Brother Marcus discovered the ancient cistern during fortress renovations, hidden behind walls that had stood untouched for centuries. The underground chamber housed a perfectly circular pool of crystal clear water, its surface as smooth as polished glass, despite the absence of any visible source or outlet. When his torch first illuminated the water surface, he saw more than mere reflections. Images formed in the depths, scenes from battles long past and others yet to be fought. Each vision lasted only moments before dissolving into ripples that shouldn't have been possible in the still water. Commander Richard must see this, he whispered, but found himself rooted to the spot, transfixed by the impossible visions swimming beneath the surface. The commander arrived with Brother Thomas, their scholar, just as new images began forming in the pool. Each knight who gazed into the water saw different visions, yet all spoke of patterns that matched prophecies sealed away in their oldest texts. These waters, Thomas breathed, spreading ancient manuscripts on the chamber floor. Our founding documents speak of a sacred pool that would show truth to those worthy to see it. But its location was lost centuries ago. During prayer times, the visions grew stronger. Knights maintaining vigil reported seeing scenes from the order's past flowing seamlessly into glimpses of future trials. The very air hummed with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Commander Richard ordered continuous watches over the pool, with knights rotating through pairs to record every vision that appeared. Brother Thomas worked tirelessly to compare their accounts to sealed prophecies in their archives. The pool shows differently to each viewer, Thomas reported during an emergency council, yet the visions form patterns, pieces of a larger message our order was meant to receive at this precise moment. The phenomenon intensified during sacred ceremonies. When knights performed ancient rituals near the water, the visions became clearer, more detailed. Each reflection carried warnings of trials to come and promises of guidance for those true to their vows. 1 week after its discovery, during midnight prayers, the pool's power reached new heights. The surface erupted with images that filled the chamber with otherworldly light, showing scenes that both inspired and terrified the assembled knights. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed them, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. This pool has awakened to show us what we must know. Trials that will test not just our swords, but our very souls. Brother." Thomas spread his translations across stone tables. The water's surface shifted as he read, confirming or correcting his interpretations. Each vision added another piece to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. Knights learned quickly that looking into the pool carried a price. Each vision granted knowledge, but also burned itself into the viewer's mind, becoming part of their dreams and prayers. The waters showed truth, but truth could be a heavy burden. During evening vigils, knights reported seeing their own reflections transform, showing alternate versions of themselves facing crucial choices. The pool revealed paths not taken and decisions yet to come, each possibility carrying its own weight of destiny. Commander Richard spent long hours studying the shifting waters, watching as past, present, and future flowed together in impossible ways. Each vision, each rippling prophecy, added another layer to a divine message they were only beginning to understand. Brother Thomas discovered references to similar pools throughout their history, always hidden, always revealing themselves in times of great need, always showing visions that would shape the Order's destiny. The waters responded differently to each knight's presence. Some saw battles, others saw ceremonies, yet others witnessed ancient mysteries being revealed. Each vision contributed to a larger tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its witnesses. "These waters offer knowledge at a cost," Brother Thomas warned during evening prayers. "They show what we must know, but bearing that knowledge changes those who receive it." Commander Richard ordered the pool's existence, kept secret from all but the most trusted knights. The visions had to remain hidden, another mystery for the Order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the pool revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The visions aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, showing trials that would test the Order's very foundations. Knights learned to approach the waters with proper reverence, understanding that each reflection could carry messages vital to their future. The pool became a living text, writing prophecy in ripples and reflections with each passing day. The mystery of the mirror pool became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torch-lit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had gazed into its depths never forgot their first sight of those impossible visions, or the weight of destiny they carried. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries reflected in sacred waters. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with visions of what was to come. The pool continued its mysterious revelations each night, each ripple a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets showed themselves in waters that reflected more than mere images. Story 15. Brother Marcus first noticed the strange writing during his midnight copying duties in the fortress scriptorium. The words he had carefully penned began to shift and change, rearranging themselves into messages he had never written. His quill moved of its own accord, guided by some unseen force to form prophecies in languages he had never learned. The ink seemed to glow faintly in the candlelight, forming patterns that matched symbols carved into the ancient walls. Each new line flowed seamlessly from his pen, carrying warnings that made his blood run cold. "Brother Thomas," he called to the senior scribe working nearby. "The text. It's changing itself." Thomas approached slowly, his own manuscript clutched in trembling hands. "Mine as well," he whispered. "Look, they form parts of the same message." Within hours, every scribe in the fortress reported similar occurrences. Their carefully copied texts transformed before their eyes, forming fragments of prophecies that seemed to complement each other. The very air in the scriptorium grew thick with supernatural energy that made candle flames dance and parchment rustle without wind. Commander Richard arrived to find his scribes gathered around a central table, their manuscripts spread out like pieces of a divine puzzle. Each page contained different text, yet all spoke of approaching trials and hidden truths. Brother Gabriel, the commander, called to their master scholar. "Bring the sealed prophecies. These writings remind me of warnings in our oldest texts." The elderly knight hurried to the secret archives, returning with carefully preserved scrolls. As he unrolled them beside the transformed manuscripts, patterns emerged, ancient predictions matching perfectly with the newly written warnings. "The texts speak as one," Gabriel breathed. "Each scribe's hand forms part of a message our order was meant to receive at this precise moment." During prayer times, the phenomenon intensified. Knights maintaining vigil in the scriptorium watched as their scribes' hands moved in perfect unison, quills dancing across parchment to form complex prophecies. The writings glowed with inner light that cast strange shadows on ancient walls. Commander Richard ordered continuous recording of every message that appeared. The scribes worked in shifts, their hands guided by forces beyond their control, to reveal layer after layer of divine warning. "These aren't random manifestations," Brother Gabriel reported during an emergency council. "The patterns match prophecies scattered throughout our archives. Predictions meant to prepare us for trials to come." The transformed text spoke of battles yet to be fought, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. Each manuscript added another piece to a tapestry of prophecy that both inspired and terrified. 1 week after the first occurrence, during midnight prayers, all the scribes' hands moved simultaneously. The scriptorium filled with supernatural light as hundreds of quills wrote in perfect harmony, forming messages that flowed like water across suddenly luminous parchment. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed his assembled knights, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These writings carry warnings we must heed, preparation for trials that will test our order's very foundations." Single quotes. Brother Gabriel spread the newest texts across the central table. The ink shifted as he read, confirming or correcting his translations. Each line added another layer to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. The phenomenon spread beyond the scriptorium. During sacred ceremonies, knights found their own hands writing unbidden, forming fragments of the same prophecies that possessed their scribes. The messages seemed to choose their vessels carefully, revealing different aspects to different writers. Commander Richard spent long hours studying the ever-growing collection of prophetic texts. Each manuscript, each transformed page, carried pieces of a divine message they were only beginning to understand. Brother Gabriel discovered references to similar occurrences throughout their history, always before moments of great significance, always marking those chosen to carry crucial warnings to the order. The writings responded differently during battle preparations. When knights touched their weapons after scribing sessions, the ink on their hands formed new patterns, ancient prayers and protection symbols that glowed briefly before fading into their skin. These manifestations mark us as messengers, Brother Gabriel told them during evening prayers. But carrying such messages comes with a price we're only beginning to understand. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The transformed texts had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the writings revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The messages aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, warning of trials that would test their very faith. Scribes learned to recognize different types of divine messages, those that warned, those that guided, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each text added another thread to a tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its writers. The mystery of the scribe's warning became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torch-lit halls and quiet chapels. But those whose hands had been guided by divine will never forget the weight of the messages they carried. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written by supernatural power. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen scribes with messages of what was to come. The transformed texts continued their revelations each night, each line a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets wrote themselves through mortal hands. Story 16. Brother Marcus first noticed it during his dawn watch along the Pilgrim's Road. The shadows cast by passing travelers formed words on the ancient stones. Perfectly legible script in languages not spoken for centuries. Each pilgrim's shadow wrote its own message, yet all seemed part of a larger prophecy. He maintained his position at the fortress gate, watching as more travelers approached through the morning mist. Their shadows continued the supernatural writing, adding new lines to the growing text that only he seemed to notice. Brother Thomas, he called softly to his fellow guard. Look at the shadows on the road. Thomas studied the ground carefully, his face paling as he read the impossible messages forming beneath passing pilgrims. Each one carries a different fragment, he whispered, yet they form a single warning. Commander Richard arrived to find both knights transfixed by the mysterious writing. The shadows grew stronger as more pilgrims approached, their dark shapes flowing together like ink on parchment. Brother Gabriel, the commander called to their scholar. Bring the sealed texts. These shadow messages remind me of prophecies in our oldest records. The elderly knight hurried to the library, returning with carefully preserved manuscripts. As he spread them before the gate, patterns emerged between the ancient writings and the words forming in pilgrim shadows. Our founding documents speak of this, Gabriel breathed. Messages written in the shadows of innocent travelers, carrying warnings meant only for Templar eyes. The phenomenon intensified as the day progressed. Each passing pilgrim's shadow contributed new text, forming complex patterns that matched prophecies sealed away centuries ago. The very air seemed charged with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Commander Richard ordered continuous observation of the road. Knights rotated through watch shifts, recording every message that appeared in the passing shadows. The writings seemed to choose their readers carefully, revealing different aspects to different observers. These aren't random manifestations, Brother Gabriel reported during an emergency council. The patterns match fragments scattered throughout our archives. Warnings our order was meant to receive at this precise moment in the fortress chapel. Knights maintained vigil as Brother Gabriel compared the shadow messages to their sealed prophecies. Each new text added another piece to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. During evening prayers 1 week later, the phenomenon reached its peak. Hundreds of pilgrim shadows moved across the ancient stones, their messages glowing with inner light that cast strange reflections on fortress walls. Brothers, Commander Richard addressed his assembled knights, we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These shadows carry warnings we must heed. Preparation for trials that will test our order's very foundations. The shadow writing revealed prophecies of battles yet to be fought, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. Each passing pilgrim unknowingly contributed to a divine message that both inspired and terrified. Brother Gabriel worked tirelessly to translate the ever-growing collection of texts. The shadows formed patterns that matched astronomical alignments and sacred geometries described in their oldest manuscripts. Knights learned to recognize different types of messages in the shadows. Those that warned, those that guided, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each text added another thread to a tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its readers. Commander Richard spent long hours studying the road from the fortress walls, watching as pilgrim shadows continued their supernatural writing. Each message, each flowing text, carried pieces of a divine warning they were only beginning to understand. The shadows responded differently during sacred ceremonies. When knights performed ancient rituals near the road, the messages grew clearer, more urgent. Their meanings seemed to shift with the movement of sun and stars, revealing new layers of prophecy. These manifestations mark us as witnesses, Brother Gabriel told them during evening prayers. But understanding such messages carries a price we're only beginning to comprehend. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The shadow messages had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the writings revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The messages aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, warning of trials that would test their very faith. The mystery of the pilgrim's path became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed the shadow writing never forgot how innocent travelers unknowingly carried divine warnings in their passing. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in shadows on ancient stones. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The shadow messages continued their revelations each day, each passing pilgrim adding words to a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth. Even when those secrets wrote themselves in the shadows of unknowing travelers on sacred roads. Story 17. Brother Marcus discovered the door during his morning prayers in the fortress chapel. The wall beside the altar had somehow opened, revealing an archway that had never existed before. Ancient symbols carved into the stone frame seemed to pulse with inner light, and a strange humming filled the air. He stood transfixed, watching as the symbols shifted and changed, forming patterns he somehow recognized despite never having seen them before. The doorway radiated an energy that made his sword vibrate in its scabbard. "Commander Richard," he called, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "Something has revealed itself." The commander arrived moments later, accompanied by Brother Thomas, their scholar. As they approached the doorway, the humming grew stronger, and the symbols began forming words in languages lost to time. "This is impossible," Thomas whispered, running weathered hands over the stone frame. "These walls have stood unchanged for centuries. Yet these markings, they match prophecies in our sealed texts." Commander Richard ordered the chapel cleared of all but senior knights. As they gathered before the mysterious doorway, Brother Thomas hurried to retrieve ancient manuscripts from their archives. "Our oldest records speak of this," he reported, spreading fragile parchments before them. "A chamber that would reveal itself only during specific prayer times, when the order faced its greatest trials." The doorway responded to their presence, its symbols shifting to form new patterns that matched illustrations in their sacred texts. Each knight who approached saw different messages written in the stone, yet all spoke of approaching destiny. During evening prayers, the chamber beyond the door became visible. Its walls were covered in shifting texts that flowed like water across ancient stones, forming messages that both attracted and repelled the eye. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed his assembled knights, "we stand before a mystery rooted in our order's deepest foundations. This chamber has awakened to show us what we must know." Brother Thomas worked through the night, comparing the moving text to sealed prophecies. The writings spoke of trials to come, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. The chamber seemed to choose its visitors carefully. Some knights could not see the doorway at all, while others found themselves drawn to specific sections of the shifting text. Each brother who entered emerged with different revelations, yet all fit together like pieces of a divine puzzle. During midnight vigils, the chamber's power grew strongest. The walls pulsed with supernatural light as ancient symbols rearranged themselves into new prophecies. Incense smoke moved against natural air currents, forming shapes that matched the flowing text. Commander Richard spent long hours meditating in the chamber, watching as the walls revealed layer after layer of hidden knowledge. Each message, each shifting symbol, added to a growing prophecy that both inspired and terrified. "These revelations carry a price," Brother Thomas warned during morning prayers. "Each truth we learn marks us as bearers of knowledge that was meant to stay hidden until this precise moment." The phenomenon intensified as holy days approached. The chamber's walls became a living manuscript, writing and rewriting prophecies that matched their most closely guarded texts. Knights maintained constant vigil, recording every message that appeared. Brother Thomas discovered references to similar chambers throughout their history, always revealing themselves in times of greatest need, always showing truths that would shape the Order's destiny. The writings responded differently to each knight's presence. Some saw battles yet to be fought, others witnessed ceremonies long forgotten. Each vision contributed to a larger tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its witnesses. During sacred ceremonies, the chamber filled with otherworldly light as knights chanted ancient prayers. The walls seemed to sing in harmony with their voices, revealing new layers of meaning in texts they had known by heart. Commander Richard ordered the chamber's existence kept secret from all but the most trusted knights. Its messages had to remain hidden, another mystery for the Order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. The chamber became a place of continuous revelation, its walls constantly shifting to show new aspects of approaching trials. Knights learned to read its messages like living scripture, understanding that each symbol carried weight beyond mere warning. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written on living stone. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The sealed chamber continued its divine revelations each day, every shifting symbol a word in a sacred language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets wrote themselves on walls that should not exist. Story 18. Brother Marcus first felt the burning during morning prayers. Letters of fire seemed to write themselves across his skin, glowing beneath his white mantle with an inner light that cast no shadows. The text formed in languages he had never learned, yet somehow understood, ancient words of prophecy and warning. The burning brought no pain, but he could feel each letter etching itself into his flesh like brands from an invisible iron. When he removed his gauntlet to examine his arm, the golden script pulsed in rhythm with the chanted psalms. "Commander Richard," he whispered after the service, "something is happening that I cannot explain." The commander's eyes widened as Marcus revealed the glowing text. "Brother Thomas," he called to their scholar, "bring the sealed prophecies. These markings match something I've seen in our oldest texts." More knights began showing similar signs within hours. Each bore different messages, yet all seemed to form parts of a larger prophecy. The very air in the fortress chapel grew thick with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades hum in their scabbards. "Our founding documents speak of this," Brother Thomas reported, spreading ancient manuscripts before them. Sacred script that would mark chosen knights when the order faced its greatest trials. Each bearer carries part of a message meant only for Templar eyes. During evening prayers, the phenomenon intensified. Golden letters burned brighter as knights chanted ancient hymns, forming patterns that matched prophecies sealed away centuries ago. The marked ones felt their skin tingle as new messages wrote themselves across flesh and bone. Commander Richard ordered continuous vigils in the chapel. Knights rotated through prayer shifts as Brother Thomas worked to decode the living text that marked their bodies. Each new message added another piece to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. "These aren't random manifestations," Thomas announced during an emergency council. "The patterns match fragments scattered throughout our archives. Warnings our order was meant to receive at this precise moment." The burning script spoke of battles yet to be fought, of choices that would test not just their swords but their very souls. Each marked knight carried a different piece of the prophecy, compelling them to gather in prayer to reveal the complete message. 1 week after the first marking, during midnight prayers, all the sacred text blazed simultaneously. The chapel filled with supernatural light as dozens of knights bore witness to messages that both inspired and terrified. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed them, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These markings are both blessing and burden, preparing us for trials that will test our order's very foundations." Brother Thomas spent sleepless nights translating the ever-changing text. The script shifted and flowed across marked flesh, revealing new layers of meaning with each passing hour. Some messages faded while others burned brighter, forming patterns that matched astronomical alignments described in their oldest texts. Knights learned to read different types of markings, those that warned, those that guided, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each bearer found their messages responding differently during sacred ceremonies, burning brightest when specific prayers were spoken. Commander Richard discovered that the markings reacted to proximity with sacred relics. When marked knights entered their relic vault, the golden script rearranged itself to reveal new prophecies. Each artifact seemed to call forth specific messages from the living text. The burning script spread carefully, choosing its bearers with divine precision. Some knights remained unmarked, while others found their entire bodies covered in flowing golden text. Each new marking added another thread to a tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its bearers. "This gift carries a price," Brother Thomas warned during evening prayers. We bear messages meant to remain hidden until this precise moment. The weight of such knowledge marks us forever. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The living text had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the script revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The messages, aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, warning of trials that would test their very faith. Knights found their markings burned brightest during battle practice, forming prayers of protection and strength that glowed through their armor. The script seemed to move with them, flowing like liquid gold beneath their skin as they performed their martial duties. The mystery of the burning script became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who bore the marks never forgot the weight of the messages they carried in their very flesh. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in living fire upon chosen flesh. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking selected knights with messages of what was to come. The sacred script continued its revelations each day, every burning letter a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth. Even when those secrets wrote themselves in fire upon their own bodies. Story 19. Brother Marcus first noticed the oil during his midnight watch in the ancient temple. It seeped from between the massive stone blocks, thick and golden, forming patterns that matched symbols carved into the walls centuries ago. The liquid moved with impossible purpose, flowing upward against nature to create messages in scripts long lost to time. The scent of ancient herbs filled the air as more oil emerged, each droplet adding to a growing tapestry of prophecy. The stone itself seemed to pulse with inner life, as if awakening from centuries of slumber. Commander Richard must see this, he whispered, but found himself rooted in place, transfixed by the flowing symbols. The commander arrived with Brother Thomas, their scholar, just as new patterns began forming in the oil. Each message seemed to respond to their presence, shifting and changing to reveal different aspects of a larger prophecy. These are not random manifestations, Thomas breathed, comparing the patterns to ancient texts. Our oldest records speak of weeping stones marking times of great trial for our order. The phenomenon spread throughout the temple complex. During prayer times, more stones began weeping their golden messages, forming complex patterns that matched prophecies sealed away in their archives. The very air hummed with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Commander Richard ordered continuous vigils in the temple. Nights rotated through prayer shifts as Brother Thomas worked to decode the flowing messages. Each new pattern added another piece to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. The stones speak of things to come, Thomas reported during an emergency council. Each message matches fragments found in our most sacred texts, warnings our order was meant to receive at this precise moment. During midnight prayers 1 week later, the temple stones reached their peak of activity. Golden oil flowed like rivers across ancient walls, forming messages that filled the sacred space with otherworldly light. Brothers, Commander Richard addressed his assembled knights, we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These stones weep not with sorrow but with purpose, preparing us for trials that will test our order's very foundations. The oil formed patterns that spoke of battles yet to be fought, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. Each stone seemed to carry different fragments of the prophecy, compelling knights to gather in prayer to reveal the complete message. In the temple's deepest chamber, where their most sacred relics were kept, the phenomenon grew strongest. The golden liquid formed symbols that matched astronomical alignments described in their oldest texts. Speaking of mysteries beyond common understanding, knights learned to recognize different types of messages in the flowing oil. Those that warned, those that guided, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each pattern contributed to a larger tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its witnesses. Commander Richard spent long hours meditating in the temple, watching as the stones revealed layer after layer of hidden knowledge. Each message, each golden pattern, carried pieces of a divine warning they were only beginning to understand. Brother Thomas discovered references to similar occurrences throughout their history, always before moments of great significance, always marking places chosen to reveal crucial truths to the order. The oil responded differently during sacred ceremonies. When knights performed ancient rituals, the patterns grew clearer, more urgent. Their meanings seemed to shift with the movement of sun and stars, revealing new layers of prophecy. These manifestations mark us as witnesses, Brother Thomas told them during evening prayers. But understanding such messages carries a price we're only beginning to comprehend. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The weeping stones had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the oil revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The messages aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, warning of trials that would test their very faith. Knights maintained constant vigil, recording every pattern, every symbol that formed in the golden flow. The stones seemed to choose their moments carefully, revealing different aspects of the prophecy to different observers. The mystery of the stone witnesses became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had seen the weeping walls never forgot how ancient stone had come alive to deliver its warnings. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in golden oil on living stone. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The weeping stones continued their revelations each night, each golden drop a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets wrote themselves in impossible tears of ancient stone. Story 20. Brother Marcus first noticed it during morning prayers in the fortress chapel. His shadow on the ancient stones refused to match his movements, instead performing gestures from ceremonies far older than the order itself. While his hands remained clasped in prayer, his shadow traced symbols in the air that seemed hauntingly familiar, yet impossible to name. He maintained his composure, continuing his devotions as the shadow performed its mysterious ritual. The movements carried an ancient gravity, as if each gesture unlocked secrets sealed away centuries ago. "Brother Thomas," he whispered after the service, "did you see my shadow during prayers?" The elderly knight nodded gravely. "Not just yours. Watch during evening prayers. You'll see we're not alone in this mystery." As the sun set that evening, more shadows began their supernatural dance. Each knight's darkened reflection performed different parts of what was clearly a larger ceremony, their movements perfectly coordinated despite their owner's stillness. Commander Richard called an emergency council in the chapel. "Brother Gabriel," he ordered their master scholar, "bring the sealed texts." These shadow rites match something I've seen in our oldest records. The elderly scholar arrived with arms full of ancient manuscripts. As he spread them before the altar, the shadows on the wall seemed to reach toward the weathered pages, recognizing something in the faded illustrations. "Here," Gabriel breathed, pointing to detailed drawings. "Ceremonies lost to time. Rituals our order was meant to remember when specific signs appeared. The shadows are teaching us what we've forgotten." During midnight prayers, the phenomenon intensified. As knights chanted ancient psalms, their shadows performed increasingly complex ceremonies. The very air grew thick with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Commander Richard ordered continuous prayer vigils in the chapel. Knights rotated through shifts as Brother Gabriel worked to decode the shadow rites, comparing them to sealed prophecies in their archives. "These aren't random movements," he reported during an emergency council. "The patterns match rituals scattered throughout our oldest texts. Ceremonies we were meant to relearn at this precise moment." 1 week later, during evening prayers, the shadows reached their peak of activity. The chapel walls filled with dark forms performing sacred rites in perfect unison, their movements filling the sacred space with otherworldly purpose. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed his assembled knights, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These shadows perform ceremonies we must relearn, rituals that will prepare us for trials yet to come." The shadow rites spoke of battles yet to be fought, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. Each dark form seemed to carry different fragments of ancient knowledge, compelling knights to gather in prayer to witness the complete teaching. In the chapel's deepest crypt, where their most sacred relics were kept, the shadows grew strongest. Their movements matched astronomical alignments described in their oldest texts, revealing mysteries beyond common understanding. Knights learned to recognize different types of shadow rites, those that protected, those that revealed, those that prepared for trials ahead. Each ceremony contributed to a larger tapestry of divine instruction that both blessed and burdened its witnesses. Commander Richard spent long hours observing the shadows, watching as they performed layer after layer of forgotten ritual. Each movement, each gestured symbol, carried pieces of sacred knowledge they were only beginning to understand. Brother Gabriel discovered references to similar occurrences throughout their history, always before moments of great significance, always teaching ceremonies crucial to the Order's survival. The shadows responded differently during battle preparations. When knights practiced with their weapons, the dark forms demonstrated ancient combat rites, movements that blended physical and spiritual warfare into something transcendent. "These manifestations mark us as students," Brother Gabriel told them during evening prayers. "But learning such ceremonies carries a price we're only beginning to comprehend." Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The shadow rites had to remain hidden, another mystery for the Order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the shadows revealed deeper layers of ceremony. Their movements aligned with rituals sealed away centuries ago, preparing them for trials that would test their very faith. Knights maintained constant vigil, studying every gesture, every pattern formed by the supernatural shadows. The dark forms seemed to choose their moments carefully, revealing different aspects of the ancient rites to different observers. The mystery of the sacred gesture became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed the shadow rites never forgot how darkness itself had come alive to teach them what was forgotten. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in moving shadows. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen nights with knowledge of what was to come. The shadow rites continued their revelations each night, each dark movement a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets taught themselves through shadows that refused to follow their owners. Story 21. Brother Marcus lay in the monastery infirmary, recovering from wounds received defending a sacred convoy. As the candles burned low on his third night there, he began seeing impossible things in the flickering light. Ethereal forms emerged from the shadows, figures in ancient Templar regalia that no living knight had worn for centuries. The apparitions moved with purpose, performing rituals he somehow recognized despite never having witnessed them. Each gesture seemed laden with meaning, each movement part of a ceremony lost to time. "Brother Thomas," he called softly to the wounded knight in the next bed. "Do you see them in the candlelight?" Since sunset, Thomas whispered back, each vision clearer than the last. "Our wounds have opened more than flesh, brother." Within days, every injured knight in the infirmary reported similar visions. Each saw different aspects of the same mysterious ceremonies, their shared sight growing stronger as their bodies healed. The very air grew thick with supernatural energy that made nearby weapons vibrate in their scabbards. Commander Richard found them all awake at midnight, watching as spectral forms demonstrated ancient rites in the torchlit chamber. "Brother Gabriel," he called to their scholar, "bring the sealed texts. These ceremonies match something in our oldest records." The elderly knight arrived with carefully preserved manuscripts. As he spread them before the wounded men, the visions intensified, as if responding to the presence of sacred knowledge. "Here," Gabriel breathed, pointing to faded illustrations. "Rituals recorded at our founding, meant to be revealed again when the Order faced its greatest trials. Our wounds have made us witnesses." During evening prayers, the phenomenon reached new heights. Spectral forms filled the infirmary, performing ceremonies that matched prophecies sealed away centuries ago. Each vision added another piece to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. Commander Richard ordered the wounded knights kept together, maintaining constant prayer vigils as Brother Gabriel worked to decode the ceremonies they witnessed. The visions seemed to choose their moments carefully, revealing different aspects to different observers. "These aren't random manifestations," Gabriel reported during an emergency council held in the infirmary. "The patterns matched fragments scattered throughout our archives. Knowledge our Order was meant to receive at this precise moment, 1 week after the first vision." During midnight prayers, the phenomenon reached its peak. The infirmary filled with supernatural light as dozens of spectral forms performed sacred rites in perfect harmony, their movements telling stories of battles yet to be fought and choices yet to be made. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed the wounded knights, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These visions mark you as witnesses to ceremonies we must remember, rituals that will prepare us for trials to come." Brother Gabriel spent sleepless nights comparing the visions to sealed documents from their archives. The spectral ceremonies spoke of destiny and duty, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. Knights found their wounds healing unusually fast, each day of recovery bringing clearer visions of the ancient rites. The apparitions seemed to respond to their growing strength, revealing deeper mysteries as they regained their health. In the monastery's sacred vault, where their most holy relics were kept, wounded knights reported their visions growing strongest. The spectral ceremonies matched astronomical alignments described in their oldest texts. Speaking of mysteries beyond common understanding, Commander Richard discovered that different battle wounds led to different visions. Each injury seemed to open specific channels of sight, revealing various aspects of the forgotten ceremonies. Together, they formed a complete picture of rituals the Order desperately needed to remember. This gift comes at a price, Brother Gabriel warned during evening prayers. The visions mark you as keepers of knowledge, meant to remain hidden until this precise moment. That burden remains even after your wounds heal. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The visions had to remain hidden, another mystery for the Order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the spectral ceremonies revealed deeper layers of meaning. The visions aligned with prophecies sealed away centuries ago, preparing them for trials that would test their very faith. Knights maintained constant vigil in the infirmary, recording every detail of the ancient rites they witnessed. The apparitions seemed to teach with purpose, each demonstration adding another thread to a tapestry of sacred knowledge. The mystery of the night's vision became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who had witnessed the spectral ceremonies never forgot how their wounds had opened their eyes to divine mysteries. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of visions granted through sacred sacrifice. And now those visions were awakening, marking chosen knights with knowledge of what was to come. The spectral ceremonies continued their revelations each night, each ghostly movement a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets showed themselves only to those who had bled in their defense. Story 22. Brother Marcus first noticed the glow during siege preparations. Sacred symbols began appearing on his shield's surface, shining with an inner light that cast strange shadows on the fortress walls. The markings matched no known script, yet he somehow understood their meaning. Warnings of trials to come and battles yet to be fought. The radiance spread across the shield's face like flowing water, forming patterns that pulsed in rhythm with the night watch's chanted prayers. Even the red cross seemed to take on new depth, layers of meaning hiding beneath its familiar form. "Commander Richard," he called softly from his post. "My shield bears messages I cannot explain." The commander's eyes widened as he approached, recognizing symbols from the Order's most ancient texts. "Brother Thomas," he summoned their scholar, "bring the sealed prophecies. These markings speak to something hidden in our oldest records." Within days, more shields throughout the fortress began to glow. Each bore different symbols, yet all seemed part of a larger message. The very air hummed with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. "Our founding documents speak of this," Brother Thomas reported, spreading weathered manuscripts before them. "Shields marked by sacred light when the Order faces its greatest trials. Each bears part of a warning meant only for Templar eyes." During evening prayers, the phenomenon intensified. The glowing shields cast otherworldly light through the chapel, the symbols shifting and changing as knights performed ancient rituals. Each pattern seemed to respond to specific prayers, revealing new layers of meaning. Commander Richard ordered continuous vigils in the fortress armory. Knights rotated through prayer shifts as Brother Thomas worked to decode the luminous messages. The shield's radiance grew stronger during these ceremonies, forming harmonies with their chanted psalms. "These aren't random manifestations," Thomas announced during an emergency council. The patterns match fragments scattered throughout our archives. Prophecies our order was meant to receive at this precise moment. 1 week later, during midnight prayers, all the marked shields blazed simultaneously. The fortress filled with supernatural light as dozens of knights bore witness to messages that both inspired and terrified. Brothers, Commander Richard addressed them. We stand at a crossroads of destiny. These shields have become more than mere protection. They're vessels of divine will, preparing us for trials that will test our order's very foundations. Brother Thomas spent sleepless nights comparing the glowing symbols to sealed documents. The markings shifted and flowed across polished steel, revealing new aspects of prophecy with each passing hour. Some faded while others burned brighter, forming patterns that matched astronomical alignments described in their oldest texts. Knights learned to read different types of radiance, those that warned, those that guided, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each shield responded differently during battle practice, its light forming protective patterns that moved with the bearer's movements. Commander Richard discovered that the shields reacted to proximity with sacred relics. When carried into their relic vault, the glowing symbols rearranged themselves to reveal new prophecies. Each artifact seemed to call forth specific messages from the luminous script. The radiance spread carefully, choosing its vessels with divine precision. Some shields remained dark, while others blazed with increasing power. Each new marking added another thread to a tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its bearers. This gift marks us as guardians, Brother Thomas warned during evening prayers. We bear messages meant to remain hidden until this precise moment. The weight of such knowledge changes those who carry it. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The glowing shields had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the radiance revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The messages aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, warning of trials that would test their very faith. Knights found their marked shields burning brightest during combat training, forming symbols of protection and strength that shone through the fortress gloom. The radiance seemed to move with them, flowing across polished surfaces as they practiced ancient battle formations. The mystery of the radiant shields became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who bore the marked shields never forgot the weight of the messages they carried. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in living light upon blessed steel. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen shields with messages of what was to come. The sacred radiance continued its revelations each day, every glowing symbol a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets robed themselves in light. Upon the very shields they bore into battle. Story 23. Brother Marcus noticed it first during the alignment of strange stars. The red cross on his white mantle began to bleed during astronomical events, foretold in their oldest texts. The blood formed patterns that matched symbols hidden in the Order's most sacred documents, each drop carrying messages meant only for chosen eyes. The bleeding seemed to follow celestial movements, growing stronger as stars shifted into prophesied positions. The crimson fluid vanished as it fell, leaving no stain but burning its messages into the minds of those who witnessed it. Commander Richard, he whispered during evening prayers, the cross. It speaks in blood that leaves no mark. As more crosses throughout the remote fortress began to bleed, each knight reported different visions in the falling drops. The very air grew thick with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Brother Thomas, the commander, called to their scholar, "Bring the sealed prophecies." These manifestations match warnings in our founding texts. The elderly knight arrived with ancient manuscripts, spreading them beneath torchlight that seemed to bend toward the bleeding symbols. Each drop of blood formed patterns that aligned with their most closely guarded predictions. "Our oldest records speak of this," Thomas breathed, comparing the blood patterns to faded illustrations. When sacred crosses weep during specific astral alignments, the order faces its greatest trial. During midnight prayers, the phenomenon intensified. Blood flowed from every Templar cross in the fortress chapel, forming complex symbols that matched prophecies sealed away centuries ago. Each pattern carried fragments of a larger message about trials to come. Commander Richard ordered continuous vigils as Brother Thomas worked to decode the bloody script. Knights maintained prayer shifts while their crosses wept mysterious messages that spoke of destiny and doom. "These aren't random manifestations," Thomas reported during an emergency council. "The patterns match fragments scattered throughout our archives. Warnings our order was meant to receive at this precise moment." 1 week later, during a rare stellar convergence, all the crosses blazed with supernatural light as they bled their prophecies. The fortress filled with otherworldly radiance as dozens of knights bore witness to messages that both inspired and terrified. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed them, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These marks are both blessing and burden, preparing us for trials that will test our order's very foundations." The blood formed patterns that spoke of battles yet to be fought, of choices that would test not just their swords, but their very souls. Each cross seemed to carry different fragments of the prophecy, compelling knights to gather in prayer to reveal the complete message. In the fortress's deepest vault, where their most sacred relics were kept, the bleeding grew strongest. The blood formed symbols that matched astronomical alignments described in their oldest texts. Speaking of mysteries beyond common understanding, knights learned to read different types of bleeding. Those that warned, those that guided, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each pattern contributed to a larger tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its witnesses. Commander Richard spent long hours in private meditation, watching as the crosses revealed layer after layer of hidden knowledge. Each drop, each crimson symbol, carried pieces of a divine warning they were only beginning to understand. Brother Thomas discovered references to similar occurrences throughout their history, always before moments of great significance, always marking places and people chosen to bear crucial revelations. The bleeding responded differently during sacred ceremonies. When knights performed ancient rituals, the patterns grew clearer, more urgent. Their meanings seemed to shift with the movement of sun and stars, revealing new layers of prophecy. "These manifestations mark us as messengers," Brother Thomas told them during evening prayers. "But carrying such messages comes with a price we're only beginning to comprehend." Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The bleeding crosses had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the blood revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The messages aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, warning of trials that would test their very faith. Knights maintained constant vigil, recording every pattern, every symbol that formed in the vanishing blood. The crosses seemed to choose their moments carefully, revealing different aspects of the prophecy to different observers. the mystery of the Holy Mark became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torchlit halls and quiet chapels. But those who bore the bleeding crosses never forgot the weight of the messages they carried, for they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries written in blood that left no stain. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The bleeding crosses continued their revelations each night, each crimson drop a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets wrote themselves in blood upon their very symbols of faith. Story 24. Brother Marcus first heard it during morning prayers in the mountain fortress's chapel. His devotions echoed back in languages he had never learned, yet somehow understood. Each word returned, transformed, carrying layers of meaning that spoke of prophecies and warnings meant only for Templar ears. The echoes seemed to emanate from the very stones themselves, growing stronger as more knights joined their voices in prayer. What began as simple repetition became a chorus of ancient tongues, each echo adding new depths to their familiar chants. "Commander Richard," he whispered after the service, "our prayers. They return to us speaking mysteries." The commander's face grew grave as the echoes continued, now forming patterns that matched prophecies sealed in their oldest texts. "Brother Thomas," he called to their scholar, "bring the ancient manuscripts. These sounds carry messages I've seen written in our founding documents." Within days, every prayer in the fortress returned with supernatural resonance. Each echo carried different fragments of what was clearly a larger message, building a tapestry of prophecy that grew more complex with each passing hour. "Our sealed records speak of this," Thomas reported, spreading weathered parchments before them. "When sacred words return in forgotten tongues, the Order faces its greatest trial. These echoes are preparing us for what comes." During midnight prayers, the phenomenon intensified. The chapel filled with overlapping echoes in dozens of ancient languages, each one carrying pieces of prophecy that matched fragments hidden in their archives. The very air hummed with supernatural energy that made armor vibrate and sword blades sing in their scabbards. Commander Richard ordered continuous prayer vigils throughout the fortress. Nights rotated through shifts as Brother Thomas worked to decode the mysterious echoes, comparing them to sealed prophecies passed down through generations. "These aren't random manifestations," he announced during an emergency council. "The patterns match predictions scattered throughout our oldest texts. Revelations our Order was meant to receive at this precise moment." 1 week after the first echo, during evening prayers, the phenomenon reached its peak. The fortress resonated with supernatural voices as dozens of knights witnessed their prayers transformed into messages that both inspired and terrified. "Brothers," Commander Richard addressed them, "we stand at a crossroads of destiny. These echoes carry warnings we must heed. Preparation for trials that will test our Order's very foundations. In the deepest chamber of the fortress church, where their most sacred relics were kept, the echoes grew strongest. They formed harmonies with astronomical alignments described in their oldest texts. Speaking of mysteries beyond common understanding, knights learned to recognize different types of echoes. Those that warned, those that guided, those that revealed ancient secrets. Each resonance contributed to a larger tapestry of prophecy that both blessed and burdened its hearers. Brother Thomas spent sleepless nights translating the otherworldly chorus. The echoes seemed to choose their moments carefully, revealing different aspects of their message to different listeners. Each new translation added another layer to a mystery that stretched back to their founding. The echoes responded differently during sacred ceremonies. When knights performed ancient rituals, the returning voices grew clearer, more urgent. Their meanings shifted with the movement of sun and stars, revealing new layers of prophecy with each celestial change. These manifestations mark us as witnesses, Brother Thomas told them during evening prayers. But understanding such messages carries a price we're only beginning to comprehend. Commander Richard ordered the phenomenon kept secret from all but full knights of proven faith. The sacred echoes had to remain hidden, another mystery for the order to guard alongside their other sacred duties. As holy days approached, the echoes revealed deeper layers of prophecy. The messages aligned with predictions sealed away centuries ago, warning of trials that would test their very faith. Knights maintained constant vigil, recording every echo, every transformed prayer that spoke of things to come. The mysterious voices seemed to build upon each other, each new message adding clarity to those that came before. The mystery of the sacred echo became another secret for the Templars to guard, whispered about in torch-lit halls and quiet chapels. But those who heard their prayers return in ancient tongues never forgot how simple devotions had become vessels for divine warning. For they were the Knights Templar, guardians not just of earthly treasures, but of mysteries carried on supernatural winds. And now those mysteries were awakening, marking chosen knights with messages of what was to come. The sacred echoes continued their revelations each night, each transformed prayer a word in a divine language. The knights maintained their vigil, knowing they had been chosen as witnesses to something profound. For in the end, that was their true calling, to stand guard over secrets that bridged the gap between heaven and earth, even when those secrets spoke through echoes of their own sacred words.